everybody, and hola a todos los colegas en América Latina. We are at the University of Victoria here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada, and with me today is Dr. Alison Preece, a professor in the Faculty of Education, Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Dr. Preece is also currently the Associate Dean for Teacher Education here at the Faculty of Education. So, Dr. Preece, thank you for agreeing to have a little conversation with me about...
Thank you for asking me.
You're
and
welcome.
it's a pleasure to be participating in something like this. And the opportunity to share some of what we've learned with our colleagues is just marvelous. So thank you for the chance to participate.
Thank you very much. So maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your past involvement with workshops for faculty members and instructors who came to us because they wanted to include an international dimension into their coursework.
Well, we designed here a faculty, an intensive faculty institute, an institute for faculty that was built entirely around redesigning a course that they're choosing to incorporate in ways that they saw made sense their heightened awareness of what internationalization meant. So let me say, so the opportunity to participate in and design these workshops was something that I had a little bit of experience with. What was interesting was just from the very beginning was the opportunity to talk with colleagues, you being one of them, Sabine, about the need for such a thing, and about how do we enrich the experiences of our students, and how do we make our courses more informative about internationalization generally for all of the students on the campus taking it, and more welcoming and inclusive for the students who are coming to our classes from other cultures, from other countries, as international students, as students who have been from families who are immigrant to Canada. There's a whole rich array of diverse experiences that it became evident sometimes our courses were not, our faculty were not sufficiently tuned into to capitalize on, to make use of, and to reflect in a way that was constructive rather than, rather than, what's the right word? Less than effective, right? So in terms of my involvement with that, it was being involved in some of the initial discussions about what should such an experience look like, and a recognition that if we wanted to really change the experiences for students, we had to make sure that we worked with faculty so clearly. But how do you do that? And that whole business about who do you work with? Do you provide information sessions and large-scale one-shot, 2-hour things, or do you really require something that's much more involved, much more, that grants time to really think these things through, and what kind of content, what kind of experience would a week like that have? So I was involved in the initial discussions. I was a participant in one of the very first session, and initially when we talked about bringing teams to be participants. So it wouldn't be just coming as me as the sole instructor of my course, but try to involve other instructors who were also teaching courses like mine, or so there was a colleague in your own unit that you could go back and work with. That was the intention, and I had the opportunity to work with one of my colleagues on one of the courses that we both taught, and it was hugely interesting, and it was valuable, So just a couple of things about that. So initial designer, a little bit involved as a participant, which I think is really important, and then later had a chance to be one of the sort of support facilitators for other faculty members that were involved. So I think I was involved in at least 4 of these in one way or another, and I can only applaud what they're trying to do, and I think the effectiveness of such an experience. And so a couple of things stand out for me about them, if you don't mind me just going on about it.
Sure, yeah.
One was the decision to have it as an intensive, initially a 5-day a week, a 5-day morning to night, everybody in together. And I think that was, given my druthers, that would still be I think the method that I would prefer. And we also had follow-ups, which I think matters. But what is so rare is the opportunity given to really concentrate on something, and concentrate on something with colleagues. So I can remember the initial discussions about, what are we talking about? You know, what does internationalization mean? It's a term that's loaded, it has so much baggage. And just the discussions that shifted that, so that, say, teaching for world-mindedness became somehow something that was felt to be more fitting for what the goals were. Just the discussions around that and the movement that happened around that stick with me. And the criteria that came to the fore and the assumptions that were being challenged in those discussions, for some people for the very first time, I think it was invaluable. And the other point was that the decision was made to not be discipline specific. So it wasn't just all the people in education would get the workshop and the people in science would have another one. It was whoever chose to come from across the entire campus. So you had this amazing mix. I can remember we had computers and we had art and we had education in the group that I was in, and that was, I think, typical. And so in one way you could think, you know, it's bound to be relevant to somebody. But the truth of it was these questions affect all of us. And so we were able to share our reactions and learn. It was much, much richer because of that decision, I think. So for me, it was time. It was a rich interdisciplinary mix. It was colleagues who had volunteered to come and had managed to find the time, to set the time aside. So now you have an issue there, right? I mean, are you always just working with the people who probably are the least that need this, because they're already keen, they're already willing to invest, and what about? But my sense is that if you're wanting to build a solid foundation, beginning with the people who are already committed and already are willing to invest, and have them create things that make a difference in their own classrooms so others can see, is probably the more compelling way to bring others in. You know, even if it just creates a resource of people that you can then work with, you know, who will then, and I think that proved to be very effective. So the other thing, you know, there's many ways to internationalize a curriculum once you've decided what that means. But I thought the decision to embed that in a particular course. So I teach a number of courses, but choose the one you want and look at that course through the lens of you look at every aspect of what makes constructing, delivering, crafting a learning experience that's contained in and around a course, and you look at everything and you think, okay, so what does that mean in terms of the values of internationalizing? How relevant is this to, or how reflective is this of this view? So I remember thinking, I was a little bit smug about, I was a little bit sure of myself. I thought I was doing pretty well in terms of my course, and I think that's why I chosen that one and not maybe another one that probably needed more work, because, you know, I thought I had something to build on. But when I honestly started looking at the array of literature, the literature in the course, the references, it was a bit of a shock to confront the fact that they were relentlessly narrow in terms of just they came from Canada and the US and maybe one or two from Australia. But when you think about how narrow a slice that is, it was a moment of uncomfortable recognition. And there were a number of those. And they were very powerful and they're very useful if you're in a context where you can work with that. And there's other colleagues that can support you through that. But I remember looking at the assignments and looking at just the goals and their relationship to the assessment and all the things that you do in a course redesign. But through that, so how does this better inform my students about the issues, the assumptions, the richness, the possibilities that are out there? And how does it work for my students who are here from a range of different backgrounds? Does it support them? Does it? And there were some real moments of not well enough. And then what can we do about it? So I just found it invaluable on that front. Is that what you were asking me?
Yes, you were starting to answer about 3 or 4 of the questions that she asked me. But that's great. I think that our colleagues can clearly see how excited Dr. Priest still is. Yeah. Quite a few years after we had that first workshop.
Right. That's right.
So actually,
the questions that are asked, the questions that unsettled me in the those days,
Mm-hmm.
still do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm not going to pretend that I've got it figured out, or I've got things where I want them to be. But I know that it's sort of, it's embedded in the conscience now, and I can no longer look at, well, I remember there were some comments made about, some observations made. We had students presenting one year, students from a variety of different countries who'd come to work at UVic, study at UVic. And they were very mixed in their reactions, but a number of them talked about how rarely their experiences had even been acknowledged, never mind invited into the discourse, the discussions in the classes. And some of that, when you talk to the professors, was, well, we don't want to put anybody on the spot, which, you know, was in many ways a misplaced intentional kindness. But the reality of that was people were dismissed, they were not known, and the rest of us, all of us, were cut off from that. And that's still... And the other thing was, you know, I recognized early as a teacher that just that you can't assume that there's connections in the class, and that for some students coming here from, it's a very lonely, coming here from Victoria, who live in Victoria, it can be a lonely transition. What that must be like when you're not sure of the language sometimes, when you've left home, when you've got family ties there, what that experience must be like, and not to have that at least recognized, and not have opportunities to connect. So again, so much of the recognitions in that course were such, in some ways, small things. They were things like, what opportunities do you have for your students to connect with each other, to know who they are at the very beginning, to have somebody, and you think, you know, well, you assume most courses obviously would do the think, pair, share, or chat with a partner and all, but a lot don't. But recognizing that that was just more than a pedagogical move, it was an inclusivity move, it was, and that it could make a huge difference. That's all. So anyway, there were so many little like that, and those have not gone away.
Right.
You know, and I used them before, but it wasn't always that I recognized how vital they were.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. As you've said, you have fundamentally two roles. I mean, you have many more roles here at the university, but fundamentally you have the role of teacher because you still teach courses. You have students, and you are now a leader in this faculty. So you
doing
have
my best.
Yeah. Can you, and I'll ask you questions about these two roles. Could you maybe start sharing with our colleagues in Latin America some of the concrete changes that you've made in your courses as a result of this workshop? So how have you, in a very practical way, applied some of the reflections and discussions that we've had throughout these workshops? Just a couple of examples.
Well, just again, they're very simple things, but they're not. You know, just to go back to that reference to the narrowness of the resources, or the reading list, or the text materials, or the assigned materials. Just now, I mean, that is something I now really monitor in my and so I make a complete point. You know, like for example, I have done this quite deliberately. I've stacked books all over the table here, but I'll make sure that there are readings on the you know that are right built in, that come from all over the place. Children's perspectives, critical assessments of whatever, you know, so that that whole, the resources that I offer are much more open. The other thing is, I've in a number of courses created assignments, and again, it's not major, and I'm almost embarrassed offering these little things, but assignments that have required the literature, the whatever references the student use have to come from outside North America. They cannot, or outside the English speaking, you know, and so that presents challenges and access and all the rest of it. But there's an awful lot out there, and so just those two moves. The other, the really making sure that there's a rich interactional component in my classes. That's something I've always considered, that students have a chance to talk to each other in low risk context, that, you know, they don't have to be standing in front of the group. They've got 2 or 3 others to talk with, and that's an ever shifting combination, so that there's a mix. That's something that I think is really important. The other thing is to recognize the need to challenge quite directly some of the assumptions, the myths, the cultural stereotyping. I mean, you know, the things we take for granted. It doesn't always work in all classes, but there are some huge, there's some openings that need to be made, and I find, so speaking as Associate Dean, I'm looking at all of our programs, and they're programs for new teachers, so anyone coming through planning to be a teacher in, not just in British Columbia. You get the license in BC, but many of our students are looking to teach across the world and hungry to do that, you know. And so what we've managed to build into our programs is, for example, the opportunity for an international practicum. That's only available to some, and that sends some of our teachers somewhere else. And so, you know, they get an experience of a different culture, and it's, again, many of our students travel. It's very different if you go as a tourist and you go to work, you know. And I think, I know that, again, you've made reference to, in the questions before, to my own international experiences, and I've done a lot of work in a lot of different places with teachers who are trying to, you know, expand their repertoire of strategies, and it's been hugely influential for me. It's had an enormous impact to meet people who are working in very different circumstances, who have different ways of looking at things, who have different opportunities. They have different senses of what's available to them. It's been so rich to meet colleagues, people who that I can talk to, that I meet over time, and you can't ever leave those kind of contexts without bringing new questions, new appreciations, new appreciations back with you. And I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, it's such a rich thing having, you know, cultures, we all enrich each other, but often we don't really believe it. And so once you've experienced that, recognizing how important it is that students who are going to teach other people have that enriched perspective and appreciation. So I'm very, very anxious that our students in our programs don't have a parochial view of anything, that they have had an opportunity to meet people from a variety of different cultural backgrounds, international contexts. So one of those steps is that we've now got in our programs embedded a very rich cultural encounter, and I say that, I'm clumsy with the word, I don't like it, but we have an opportunity for Indigenous education, so exposure to Indigenous pedagogies, and a totally different way of a different way of approaching teaching, and it's done with it makes it possible to meet Indigenous educators and community members in ways that are experiential and exploratory and respectful and educative. And it changes our students and who they are and what they see. It changed me. So I'm thinking, you know, making sure that the program itself offers that opportunity to expand what you know of others, and who you consider others, and who is the we all of a sudden. All those questions, I want them threaded through. So, and I think they are getting that way. So, I don't know if that's part of the question, but it is on so many levels it matters. You know?
No, I really appreciate those comments about Indigenous education and the relationship to the international, because all our colleagues in Latin America who are enrolled in this diploma program are living in countries where, just like in Canada, there are large Indigenous populations. So I think your comments are very relevant to our colleagues in that regard.
I know that including those opportunities in our program in a meaningful way, not in a tokenistic way, and not just for those few students who choose to take that as an elective, but as a shared experience, it has made an enormous difference to the perspective that many of our students have and take, and they and to our Indigenous colleagues who, you know, feel that their contribution, their knowledge has been at least recognized you know. And that's been a long time coming in Canada. But so again, throwing back some of those assumptions that some of the historical, what's the word? Some of those, some of the damage, some of some of the things that can go so dreadfully awry when we don't even know each other becomes evident. And if it's evident on this scale, it's evident more broadly. But the other point was, again, just really, I was really embarrassed to realize that we have all over the campus people who have all kinds of expertise, right? There are professors from Chile. There's a wonderful professor from Mexico just down the hallway. There's people from all over the world, graduate students, and do we in any sort of concerted way try and welcome, give them space in what we're doing, and what a difference it would make if we did. So again, I haven't done that anywhere near as well as I think, but we're building in opportunities. And I think, if nothing else, what this experience did was make you so acutely aware of the omissions, the wonderful opportunities. It wasn't a guilt thing, but the losses. It was like an invitation. So look, if we get this right, if we can infuse not just the unit on the end or three a day special or 4 guest speakers. I'm not talking about that. I think that was what was wonderful, was recognizing that through the course redesign process, that every aspect of the course, the learning experience, the opportunity to be a teacher or learner, a scholar, it had to be pervasive. It had to be, there was no way to segment it off. And I think that was one of the richest insights of all. And I love that part about it. And it's a challenge, Yeah. It's all to the good. Sorry.
What I hear you saying, you mentioned that you have quite a bit of international experience yourself. As a researcher, as an education practitioner. I know you've worked in Eastern European countries. You have more recently worked in Liberia and West Africa. So, and apparently those insights and those experiences and those interactions you had there with other education practitioners have hugely shaped your lens of how you view things here at home in Canada. Now,
it's mutual, It's partly because you seek out experiences like that in some ways, because you're already looking through particular eyes. But yes, they have.
We know from past research that those faculty members, those instructors who have those experiences generally find it easier to view their own courses and to reshape their own courses through a more international, a more world-minded lens. Do you have any advice for colleagues who do not have this kind of rich international experience? I don't want to put you on the spot, maybe that's too much of a question to ask, but we know that some colleagues do not have those kinds of backgrounds. They don't come with that rich kind of international experience. So how could they possibly...
you throw me right back to the discussions we had when we were designing, or when you were so involved in designing that initial institute, and it was, it has to be something invitational, right? They has to see something very practical and valuable for them that will make a difference to what they do. And so again, I thought that the idea of making it practical. This is about a course. It can be your course, and you can shape it the way you see fit. That kind of leaving the control with the faculty member to buy in as they wish and as they're ready and but providing them with a setting where they can experience the excitement of others who are trying it. Nobody's professing themselves to be expert. But I remember the encounters that were set up in those weeks, where people who'd taken the workshop the year before, the faculty members, had come back and we're talking to the ones who are trying it now about, okay, so this is what I did and this is what I changed, and look, this was so much more interesting for. So you see, as a teacher, you can experience a very different kind of engagement of your students, of yourself. I hadn't expected this and look, that happened. That kind of peer-to-peer testimony, if you like, was very, very infectious. And it wasn't okay, we've decided that internationalization of the curriculum is a priority item at the university. It is. And it was. And again, in some ways, having that made a strategic value so that it was the message coming from the administration that this matters, mattered. But a lot of things can come from the administration, and they're not going to change behavior unless the person who, the individual sees a reason for that it will benefit them. So just, again, the opportunity to talk over with colleagues who can speak frankly about why they might be hesitant, or just admit that, you know, they didn't think of it this way. I can remember our colleagues in science saying, why on earth would they need an internationalization of the curriculum workshop when science was, I mean, you hear this all, science is fundamentally international. Anyway, end of story. I don't need to do anything more. And you're thinking, you know, but sometimes, you know, so I don't think you make anybody feel guilty. I think you provide concrete examples of, well, it could look like this, or a couple of small changes, if you tried that instead. Or, you know, the other thing was, for me, I thought was powerful, was hearing the students themselves talk about, I came to you, from this. These are the international students who said, I came to you, Vic, hoping for this. But so far, I haven't. And, you know, I'd love to be able to offer, I don't know, just even a little bit of commentary about what it's like in my country to do. We're doing, I don't know, you know, early childhood education, just what that's like in my, but nobody's asked me. And to hear that directly was very, very powerful. So I think trying to provide those experiences really, really make a difference. But concrete examples that people can see they can import in a non-risk, non-threatening way. And also that there's the way that I thought was clever that this particular institute was designed was there was follow-up. So there was an opportunity for people 6 months later, I think it was even 9 months later, to come together. You'd all been in the workshop, so, you know, around a table, around a lunch. What was it like? What happened? What do you have? That was nice because it also said it matters enough that people aren't going to follow up. And, you know, and then you had a sounding board and an opportunity to say, you know, to strut your stuff a little, right? Okay, I made this change, and let me tell you, and that was nice. So I think it's got to be positive, you know, not punitive, and it's got to be supported. That was the other decision, the number, you know, we I think we were looking for loads of numbers, but in fact, we didn't have huge groups, but we had enough people to support each other, that they could talk to knowledgeable colleagues about it, and that was very useful too.
And one of the most important strategies really for all of you is to find champions such as Dr. Priest in your institutions. Find faculty members, find professors, ideally those that also play some administrative role and interact with senior administration at your institutions. Those are the champions of internationalization of the curriculum. Well, Dr. Priest, I thank you very much.
You now set the bar up, and I have to go. I'm going to try harder.
But is there anything else, like one final word, one final piece of advice you would like to share with our colleagues?
I don't give advice, but I just want to say, I wish I could see you, but I just want to encourage you, because this is just such a. It's such a wonderful opportunity to be learning from each other, and I just, any chance you can get to put colleagues who care together with a little bit of time to talk about the things they care about, and the way we're going to make this planet a little more habitable place for all of us. These conversations are not trivial anymore. Our existence hinges on them, and so I just wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Priest. Thank you to all of you. Muchas gracias para su atención y hasta luego.
And all I can say is muchas gracias too.